Dr. Schuber. Thank you. I appreciate all the conveners and organizers for bringing us here today. I look forward to discussions with everybody after the session. My name is Brian Schuber, and I'm an assistant professor in the School of Geosciences, and I study how the atmospheric chemistry, how CO2 in the atmosphere, and how climate has changed on various timescales. And so some of the places I work are in the high Arctic, shown on the first slide. I'll get to that in a minute. But first, I just want to show what the CO2 data look like for recent climate change, if you haven't seen this. This shows CO2 concentrations in the atmosphere for the last 55 years from Mauna Loa and the South Pole, showing the steady increase in CO2. This is a very short period of time. As geologists, we can look at longer time scales to see how CO2 has changed. Associated with this CO2 rise is a wide-scale increase in global temperatures. For the last 100+ years, we have a really good record of global temperatures. But going back farther than that, we need to use some other kind of proxy measurement to get a sense of how temperatures are changing. From this, you'll see that actually global temperatures have been above average for the last 25 years. So on longer time scales, we can use other proxies, other techniques to look at how CO2 and temperatures, precipitation, other climate factors have changed. One of them shown here for the Cenozoic, this last 65 million years of Earth history, where we went from having ice-free poles in both Antarctica and Arctic to what we have today as our ice house type climate. So there's various places in the world where I've gone to study the organic matter that's preserved in the fossil record. Today I'm going to focus on two spots in the Arctic, one in northern Canada, shown up in the top left, and one up in far northeastern Siberia, where we've gone to collect modern fossil wood specimens to reconstruct past changes in climate. So one of the things we do in the lab is first, when we go out in the field, we'll collect these wood samples, we'll bring them back to the lab, and we'll try to use them in order to reconstruct a proxy or some way that we can relate the chemical signatures of the wood to changes in the climate and the atmospheric chemistry in which the plants grew. And so here's one of the students working in the lab slicing up one of these pieces of modern wood, where they're dividing it into 100 micron thick slices, about the thickness of a piece of paper, and they're using this to generate a really high resolution record of seasonal changes in climate that's recorded within these annual growth grains of the wood. And this is kind of data set you can generate from this. These are carbon isotope measurements. Won't get into how these measurements are made. It's a very laborious process done in the lab. And as a result, you can actually get down to sub-weekly resolution on climate change from these tree ring data. And so from this, one of the applications of this could be to look at changes in storminess and extreme events through time. So as a geologist, what's our interest in this is to actually look at how you can use this organic matter from the plants that's preserved in the fossil record to reconstruct this on longer time scales and get a better sense of how climate and CO2 have changed on broader time scales. And so we looked at the fossil record across 500 million years of time. There's a lot of organic matter preserved in the fossil record. So one of these sites up in northern Canada is shown here. All the dark layers are fossil forest layers. These are areas that have leaf litter, fossil wood, basically preserved fossil floors. They're basically low-grade coals. All these layers are buried forests, and they're about 50 to 55 million years old. And within these layers of sediments, we can pull fossil wood out of these sediments. These are mummified pieces of wood. They're still preserved as wood. They're not petrified as rock. And so we can do the same kind of geochemical analysis that we can on modern wood applied to these fossil specimens as well, to get an idea of how the climate has changed over really long periods of time. And so this is an artist's reconstruction of what the environment in northern Canada looked like about 55 million years ago. You had taxodium, you had cypress trees, you had the descendants of redwoods living up near the North Pole. You had large non-migratory mammals like this living up there, a very fundamentally different climate than we have today. The other place that I've gone is in far northeastern Siberia. These are some somewhat younger fossil sediments that date back to about 11 million years ago. This is an interval of Earth history where we started to get the first Arctic sea ice, when we started to have global cooling leading to Arctic sea ice. And so again, these fossil sediments, these fossil substrates can help us to determine how that climate changed across these major geologic events. And so again, we have really well-preserved mummified wood from these sites. You can see the cellular structure. You can see early wood to late wood transitions. We can actually extract cellulose out of this wood in the lab and use it to get a reconstruction of changes in temperature and precipitation through time. So again, it's a very chemical-intensive process. Here's one of the grad students working on this for his master's project, extracting cellulose from these fossil wood specimens in order for him to get a reconstruction of temperature and see how temperature changed at the last glacial maximum, which is about 40,000 years ago. These are a list of all the students in the last few years since I've been here that have worked on these various projects. None of this would be done without them. Also want to point out our lab technician, Ying Feng, in the middle there, who runs all the stable isotope analyses in the lab. Dr. Sui, in the bottom left, just left here for a position at Dartmouth College, and all the other graduate and undergraduate students that have been involved in this work. So I'd like to open this up, at least for the discussion time period, to meeting with other faculty and interested people about ways that we could use the stable isotope facility in the School of Geosciences to work on some collaborative proposals that involve extracting some compounds from these sediments, whether it be historical context or whatever it might be, for better applying this work across a wider breadth of areas. Thank you.
Thank you.